Hello and welcome back to the weekly AVIAtest webinar. I'm here tonight to talk to you about occurrence reporting, and I have the pleasure and the honor to welcome with me tonight Mr. John Franklin, Head of Safety Promotion with European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA. Hello, John.
Hi, thanks for involving me in this. It's interesting to be here.
Thank you. So, as we said last week, we are going to talk to you a little bit more about occurrence reporting. We all know that it's not a very easy subject, and that sometimes people hesitate to file reports because there are many doubts as to what will be done with these reports, and if somehow filing a report could harm the pilot or controller who filed it in the first place. So we very much understand that it's an area over which many people have questions, and if you are ready, then we will kick right in and start talking about this. Okay, so John, one of the most frequent questions that we receive from pilots is, am I under a legal obligation to report events?
Yeah, so the main, when it comes to occurrence reporting, there's an EU regulation, 376/2014, that it's kind of a strange regulation because effectively it's at the same level as the EASA basic regulation. So it's a European Commission EU regulation rather than being part specifically of the EASA rule set. And within Regulation 376, and there's an associated implementing regulation and various annexes, etc. But within that regulation and the associated implementing regulation, there are a list of reportable occurrences, so the types of events that effectively pilots are mandated to report under that regulation. And for general aviation, it's the commander of the aircraft, so the pilot of the aircraft who has that responsibility to report under that regulation.
Thank you. And when you say that the commander of the aircraft has that obligation to report, where or to whom do they have to report?
So in terms of the process itself, it's effectively the authority of the air you should submit the report to the authority who issues your license or the authority for the aircraft you fly. Now it's all a bit, there are lots of what ifs and wherefores in that, and it can be sometimes a little complicated. So the easiest, or there are two ways to do it, is basically to go to the national website of the authority who issue your license and find the relevant page for occurrence reporting, at which point one of two things will happen. Some national authorities have their own forms for that process, and then other national authorities point directly to a European occurrence reporting portal that was set up with the EASA and the national authorities and the Joint Research Centre, who build a system called EASA that all of the national authorities use for their occurrence reporting, and it will take you to another portal effectively where you can complete your report, and then your report will go to the national authority that either you reported to their website, or when you first get to the European reporting portal, there are all the different flags. You click on the relevant flag of the authority who you're licensed by, and then the report will go to them.
Okay, but then you were talking about occurrence. What is the difference actually between occurrence and the database that's called the ECR, or European Central Repository?
Yeah, so effectively what happens is that, so EASA is effectively, think of it like a computer system. So EASA is the system that all of the different authorities have to process and manage the occurrences themselves. and every authority connects to their national database through ECES. And similarly, here in Cologne, EASA have our national, our EASA database, or our EASA ECES database, that stores all of the reports. And again, this is part of the reporting regulation, is that in a preset period of time, each of the different authorities have a certain amount of time to upload occurrences to the European Central Repository. So you can imagine there are 32 EASA member states. They all have their own national database of occurrences, and then all of those then go into this European Central Repository. So the ECR is effectively the aggregated data from all of the EASA member states.
Interesting, because we have many people also, and that's both controllers and pilots, who actually wonder what happens with their report once it's filed with their authority, and also who are, I wouldn't say disturbed, but that would feel more comfortable if they had some sort of feedback after the investigation is over. So is it possible for anyone of the public or as a pilot or as an air traffic controller to have access to that European Central Repository?
So actually within the regulation, there is a situation where you can request data effectively relevant to yourself through your national authority. So maybe we could provide a link to where information about that is with the webinar afterwards. But yeah, so when you submit a report to your authority, you're then able to effectively go and find out more about that report. Now, as you say, in an ideal world, it would be great if everybody could get feedback on every single report. And one of the challenges with that is purely kind of in terms of numbers. So I think collectively across the system, there are now over 200,000 occurrence reports that are raised across the EASA member states. It varies from year to year, but generally that's kind of the rough kind of numbers that we have. And then obviously all of the different fees and charges that are paid to the national authorities, you know, that provides the resources. So quite often it's kind of a resource challenge to be able to feed back. I know for some authorities, you know, tens, 20, 30,000 plus occurrence reports to be able to feed back on that. But actually, certainly that's one of the reasons why we set up our safety promotion team within EASA, is that whilst it might not be possible to provide information on every single occurrence, it's, you know, at the moment it's kind of somewhat of a black hole. And what we want to be able to do at least is to provide through our new safety promotion website that we're building now, at least information on is so that you can at least see that all of the reports that get submitted are actually used for something rather than just disappearing into a hole, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Then the next question that would come to mind with many users is, what is the interest in my reporting an occurrence? What does it bring me?
So one of the biggest things, we certainly hear this a lot from across the aviation community, but particularly when we have conferences and events with the GA community, is one of the challenges is that, you know, people often question, why did EASA make a particular decision, or why was a particular rule introduced, or why was a particular thing done in terms of, you know, EASA activities and actions. And in many cases, in the vast majority, when we do rulemaking activities, or even from what drives our safety promotion planning, is that, you know, it's all data driven. So all of the occurrences in the European Central Repository, all of the accidents and serious incidents reported to the accident investigation boards in Europe, all of that information is used to decide, well, should we be working on loss of control, or should we be working on airborne collisions? And then, you know, for example, we have a lot of safety promotion work in the next version of the European Plan for Aviation Safety on airborne collisions and conspicuity. And then in terms of the specific actions we take, that's driven by the information from occurrence reports. So the more information you can provide us in the occurrence reports, the better those reports can be coded in a taxonomy that's done in the national authorities, so that when we do this analysis, we do it based on the best picture. And kind of the best example I give of this is, it's like taking your holiday photographs with a really old 1 megapixel, 2 megapixel, kind of one of the first digital cameras, and then proudly showing all your friends all these fantastic places that you visited. Is that effectively you don't have the granularity, you don't have the depth of in that picture to really enjoy it and see what's there. And it's the same as that with occurrence reporting. If we don't have enough reports, it's like having a very grainy photograph to make decisions with. So the more reports and the more information we have, the better informed we are for the decisions we want to take.
Right, very good. I like the image of that photograph taking. It actually speaks very well. But now, if 2 or more people, because what I understand is that, of course, whilst the aircraft pilot in command is ultimately the person who has the legal obligation to file a report, I also understand that even witnesses or other persons can, of course, report as well. What would happen if 2 or more people witness the same event and that they report it? Are the reports going to come together and be analyzed as one?
So that's in a sense where it gets a little bit more challenging, because if you have, particularly in border regions where actually an occurrence might involve, I think the most complicated example I've seen is effectively a 4-country occurrence, which involved, I think, a Dutch and a French aircraft controlled by a German controller as it approached handover to Luxembourg airspace. So you had this situation where effectively you had four reports in 4 different countries, and tying them together can sometimes be a challenge. One of the things we do have, thankfully, in fact, it's the first job I did when I first came to EASA, so we have a group which brings together a number of times teams, different national authorities. So they're quite well connected. They know who each other, the different teams know who they are. So it's quite easy for people to pick up the phone and say, oh, this looks like it's involved another aircraft from France. Have other people got other parts of that picture, so they can come together. Certainly if you're talking about lots of people in the same situation, but either in the same aircraft, so say there's 3 of you in the aircraft, you're all pilots. Certainly throughout the implementation of the reporting regulation, the focus was always kind of that common sense should apply. So while you could look at the letter of the law and says every pilot should report, actually, if there's 3 people on the aircraft, the person that's best placed to report the occurrence ideally should do that. So there's no need for, if dare I say, and we had a question once from a gliding club, where what happens if 100 people on a club day all see the same occurrence? There is no need for all 100 people, despite the fact that they're all pilots, to report that. Ultimately, it's about common sense. So if there's somebody on the aircraft, 1 person on the aircraft reports, perhaps a controller. If it involves an aerodrome or an airport, perhaps somebody from the aerodrome may choose to. But as I say, it's we really try and apply as much simplicity and common sense to the process as possible.
Then, about these personal requirements for reporting. Many people are also concerned with the confidentiality and the anonymity of the reports. Are these reports confidential or anonymous?
Yeah, so one of the key parts of Regulation 376, and actually it does cause authorities a little bit of a challenge is that in ECAS and in the ECR, the authorities have to go through the reports and make sure that no personal data, names, etc., are stored with the report. So yeah, indeed, a lot of effort at the national authorities goes into this anonymous nature and using the occurrences for the purposes of improving safety and learning, and not, hopefully, I know it's not a perfect situation completely, but hopefully it's not about punishment, etc. It's about what can we learn from these occurrences to improve safety.
No, it's very. I like very much that you talk about this spirit of not punishing people, because of course, and that is like one of the most frequent questions that I hear and I heard as a controller: can my report be used against me?
So no, effectively within, if, and I've seen cases of this in the past, but effectively the report, whatever process in theory that might happen in terms of a punishment should be done, if there's not as part of the occurrence report there, if there's a further, police investigation or whatever that is, then that should be separate from the occurrence reporting process. Obviously, there's quite a complicated legal, number of different legal systems across the EASA member states. So it's not, that's probably, the situation's a lot more complicated than that. But in a kind of general perspective, there is, of course, the system. So there's, in general, the report shouldn't be used. There is then this consequence, the concept of gross negligence, etc., which is effectively the difference between a no blame culture and a just culture. So if you deliberately set out to cause deliberate harm or deliberate problems for somebody, etc., then potentially it could then be used in that sense. But certainly theoretically with the just culture principles that apply, and then also the different, so there is then an arbitration kind of process where if reports are used in a way people think perhaps they shouldn't, then every national authority has effectively has a process to assess that. And I know it's something that our colleagues in the analysis team do audit member states against and check that process amongst all the various other things. They do the standardization audits against all the different authorities in the context of the reporting regulation.
Could you explain for all the pilots who are watching and also for the controllers the differences between the mandatory and the voluntary reporting systems or schemes?
Yeah, so effectively the mandatory scheme is what's provided in terms of the list of reportable occurrences within 1018, which is the implementing regulation that supports regulation 376. So the mandatory, in that regulation, there's a particular part of that implementing regulation specifically for general aviation, and it lists the different occurrences that are classed as mandatory reporting. But of course, there are a lot of situations where, particularly in terms of potential for an accident, where you have an occurrence, you think, hey, somebody could really learn something interesting from this. Then you could report. It's not on the list of reportable occurrences, but when you report it, that's then effectively what goes into the voluntary box.
Nice. Now, from my personal experience as a controller, there were, of course, and I don't want to go too much into technicalities here, but we have seen, and I have certainly seen, disagreements over procedures that people used to interpret in a different way. And because of that, and because of the nature of the job, which is basically sending repeated traffic, repeated aircraft in the same way all the time, I have seen people sending in reports to CAA every 3 or 4 minutes for an hour, just because there was a disagreement on procedure. And so, of course, because of that, all, let's say, the arrivals into a specific airport would be coordinated in a certain way by a controller to another one who doesn't like it. And then the one who doesn't like it keeps sending papers and papers and papers. Do you think that it's that there is not a possibility of abusing the system by doing something like that?
Yeah, it's certainly something I've seen, and certainly something, as you say, there are examples of people using. In a former life before I joined EASA, I was in the Air Force in the UK, and certainly one of the list of reportable occurrences that we saw was certain types of technical failure. And quite often, what would happen, I remember a case with a helicopter seatbelt that a number of crew members didn't particularly like the design of. So one of their ways of tackling this problem was by raising every single flight an occurrence report about a seatbelt, on the basis that it was on the list. And yeah, I know there are other examples that I see, and hopefully, this is where you would like to think that, again, common sense would apply. And after seeing a number of a particular thing from a particular place, perhaps an aerodrome or particular piece of airspace, is that the national authority and the organisations and the people involved would at least have a conversation to try and figure out what the problem was, and what was causing this. But there's always a possibility that the whole system can be abused. And I remember when we first put occurrence reporting online effectively through this European occurrence reporting portal, I remember we were very concerned, potentially about the theory that you could have, people submitting, reports as Mickey Mouse and ridiculous things like that as well. And I have to say, we've been pleasantly surprised that so far we haven't seen so much of the kind of ridiculous reports, or indeed, the ones we don't see so often, situations where people misuse the system about a particular complaint. And I say, actually, the ones I can think of myself, I know they've been fairly quickly, it's fairly quickly that the authority and the organisation have had a discussion to try and resolve it anyway.
I've also had feedback from pilots back when I was a controller. I have seen things like air procs outside controlled airspace. So obviously it was not a mandatory reporting for us, but I have seen pilots not really happy about each other's way of flying. Let's put it like that. And who would basically discuss what had happened, or discuss an occurrence over the phone or in person, and then coming to terms with it and saying, okay, since we agreed who was at fault, and whoever was at fault apologized to the other, then we're not going to file any report because we sorted it between ourselves. Do you think that there's a way to convince these people that actually filing a report would, in the long term, help the general safety culture, basically?
Yeah, I think that's one of the, certainly with our safety promotion work, and I know with all the different analysis teams of the authorities, there's a lot of work that's been going on ever since 376 came in. Really, I think it's a lot of it's about us as authorities trying to help the GA community feel more comfortable. I know one of the interesting things within the reporting regulation is that just culture has very much been focused on the situation between aviation employees, pilots, etc., and their organizations. And one of the parts that perhaps isn't so much discussed is that about the relationship between a GA pilot reporting to his authority or her authority and the authority, and how does that work in terms of just culture. We certainly know of some cases in certain countries, thankfully many years ago, where a GA pilot reports something, there is some kind of punishment or something happens, and then almost immediately the level of reporting from the GA community in that country or in a particular club or area can be really quickly affected by one situation that isn't well handled. And we put a lot of effort into collaborating with the authorities. looking at how we can do that and continually trying to improve reports, the way we communicate the information, reports, what we're doing with the reports, and certainly, as I say, our new safety promotion website for the general aviation community that we'll launch in the next few weeks or so. A lot of that will be about sharing the information from occurrence reporting, so you don't get this kind of black hole feeling. You get this feeling that, yes, when you report, it is genuinely there to help make European aviation a better place, to help EASA and other organizations make better decisions, to hopefully, particularly as part of our GA roadmap, the goal is to make general aviation as fun, enjoyable, and as simple as possible. And the more information we have from occurrence reports, hopefully the easier it is for us to do that.
This is really
that makes
good to
sense.
hear, because having been a controller myself, I've also lived it from that side of the story, and always when pulling up the reporting application of our company, the question would pop in our heads like, won't I suffer from prejudice from my employer just because I filed a report? Like people would say, yeah, it's him again. He always files reports for this. Or maybe, this guy, I know he can't work properly. And, it also has to do with interpersonal relationship between colleagues or between members in a flying club, who basically will suffer a bad rep from actually filing a report.
And I know what you mean, and actually we do another area we're doing a lot of safety promotion on, or preparing a lot of safety promotion, is in the context of safety management systems, and really this idea that there's a historic sense that safety is something for safety people, and that kind of theory applies, is that people say, oh well, why is that person reporting or that person not reporting? Is hopefully what we're trying to get to is a situation where safety is something everybody in the whole aviation community does. They, when you see hazards, effectively it's being a hazard hunter and telling other people about those hazards, so that we can all avoid those hazards and all improve the situation. And then there are of course safety people who analyze that information and do something with it. And again, this is where hopefully it's about us all working together to share the knowledge and information. And certainly we've seen, I know in some countries already, the general aviation community have kind of set themselves up a little bit like an airline or an airport, where you have somebody in the flying club who kind of acts as that safety manager in that kind of almost kind of non-professional kind of aviation role of collecting information and occurrence reports, using that to help people learn from each other's experiences, to share information when you have club evenings or club days and these kinds of things. And certainly that's something we'll be doing through our new safety promotion site, is sharing other people's experiences of different kind of safety problems, whether it's inadvertent flight into IMC conditions, or staying in control. Particularly we see, certainly in terms of accidents, loss of control being one of the biggest killers. And the more we can share everybody's experiences, it's all very nice us doing occurrence reports based on accidents and these kinds of things, and putting that online, but actually to have pilots sharing their experiences with each other, so we can all learn and improve and make a better system. Hopefully that's ultimately where we get to in the long term.
I'm really hopeful as to that as well. Is EASA actually working, or no, working? I know you're working with the national authorities, but what kind of relationship / feedback do you receive from the national authorities when you go and tell them you shouldn't punish people based on the reports they did?
So in a sense that one of the things that's been quite nice, so I was involved in the development of the reporting regulation from the beginning, and I was responsible at the time for this network of analysts. And whilst occasionally we got some questions, I think the fact that this is enshrined and it's in the regulation is the discussion isn't about should it be there or not. You know, it's there, and this is what we're all trying to get towards. And the discussion is more now about, you know, how can we do that in the best way possible with the resources available, etc. Rather than it's kind of nice in a sense that I can't remember the last time I had to, there was a discussion with anybody, whether it was actually a national authority or an organisation, or you know, when we have conferences and events and workshops, nobody's really discussing should we have just culture and how should people be treated. It's more how can we just get better at the way we do it, I think, and hopefully that's, you know, I certainly see that as quite a positive. Yeah, the fact that the discussion and the conversation is positive like that is quite good.
That's really, really nice. Now we had a question that I found quite interesting from one of our regular viewers, Dominic from Belgium. He's asking us, as a ground instructor, how is EASA, or what does EASA suggest that could be done in order to improve the awareness, the public awareness, or the general pilot awareness about just culture and reporting? Are there any materials, or is there any way that instructors um, can present this reporting system to their student pilots?
So at the moment, the main thing, the main promotion or the main material that's available is, if you get, I'll have to double check the exact website, the name of the website, but there's a website for occurrence reporting in Europe, which is the same place as the portal, and there's a set of guidance material that's provided for Regulation 376. So it's aviationreporting.eu. And then on that aviationreporting.eu website is specifically some information about just culture. On the related information part in the bottom right-hand corner, there's specifically a part that says why safety reporting. There are a number of different posters available there. And it talks particularly, there's a part about mandatory reportable occurrences for sport and leisure aviation. But dare I say, that information is quite dry. It's not available in all the different languages. So certainly one of the things we're looking at doing as a key part of this new safety promotion website is to provide more resources and information in that for all the different people in the GA community. And actually one of the things of that website in the second phase of its development later in the year is actually there's a Google Translate plugin that enables you to view everything in the website in all sorts of different languages. It's not perfect, but at least it makes it easier to share the material with people in different countries around Europe. So certainly at the moment, through the aviationreporting.eu website, and then in the future through our GA community safety promotion site once it's launched, and we'll share that through, we have a Facebook page for EASA GA Together for Safety, and General Aviation Europe, which is a Facebook group that then we share this information through, as well as on our website.
It was really super interesting talking to you, and I'm really happy that we could convey this message to all our pilot friends who are watching us. This concludes the webinar for today, and also this concludes this prolific season of webinars that we started in March. It was rather short, but the idea came initially because of the confinement and then all the health crisis, but hopefully we will be back for another season starting mid-September. So I would like to thank you again, John, for participating in this webinar.
Thanks for inviting us. Yeah, it's really good to be here.
Also, thank you to all the people who watched webinars throughout the season. We will post all the links about which we were talking today as a description of the video that will be made available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Thank you everybody who participated in the development of this series of webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again after the summer holidays, which we wish you to have very, very pleasant, and see you then. See you, John. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks very much.